Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. Today we're going to take a look at gender equality and what's being done to empower women in many areas of the world. My guest is an expert on this topic. Raquel Lagunas is the Interim Director of the Gender Team for the United Nations Development Program, commonly called UNDP. She has over 20 years of experience on gender equality in development settings, and she's worked with various agencies such as the World Food Program and the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Raquel Lagunas, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Thank you so much for inviting us and for inviting me.
I appreciate you being with me. Thank you. We're going to get into gender equality here in just a moment, but let's talk just a minute or so on the UN Development Program, UNDP. What's its mission? What does it do?
Well, the UNDP, our main goal is reducing poverty across the world. We have presence in 170 countries. And when I say reducing poverty, what does it mean? It means offer to people options, which means they need to have drinking water, they need to have access to education, they need to have good institutions delivering policies for everybody, right? For all. So that's what we do. We work on poverty eradication, exclusion, and inequalities. That's what our main goal. And we support governments. The governments are our main partner. We work with them hand to hand to find solutions to challenges like, imagine, how to review this constitution. Then we go and we help them, we support them. How to do this electoral process better, how to give identities to women in rural areas and far from the capital. This is the kind of work that we do. We work on governance, we work on health and prevention of HIV/AIDS. We work on climate change, helping governments to be resilient, to build their own plans to react if they have a tsunami. Or we also work in conflict countries to help countries that are in transition towards peace to get the governance functions, institutions functioning, all of these kind of things.
You've got a lot of activities going there. It's a very broad-based agency.
It's the biggest
Biggest, and
agency,
it covers a lot of different topics, a myriad of very important topics. Now, our viewers can go to your website, undp.org, to get more information on what we're talking about today and other issues we may not get to. Let's talk about the Gender Equity Team, or the Gender Team, I guess is what you call it. What is the main purpose of that? And we'll get into the various projects that you're involved in, but what is your basic thrust or basic mission?
Well, the Gender Team, what we do is to help our country offices to every single program, every single activity, to ensure that benefits equally men and women, because there are many times cultural issues, bias, prejudice that many times we are not aware of that. So unless we intentionally invest in capacities, building capacities, giving them the tools, the guidance on how to do it better, how to promote gender equality. When we work on, for instance, reviewing a constitution, what does it mean? It means that they need to pay attention to non-discrimination or the principle of equality. When you work on health or preventing HIV/AIDS, it means that you need to pay attention to the left behind, to women. Usually the left behind are women, right? This is our role. We help country offices and our partners to do things better and to promote gender equality through our programs.
And it's so important.
You tell me if I'm explaining.
No, I'm understanding it all.
Yes?
You got so much on your plate.
Okay.
You've got a lot underway, but it's so important to empower women. And I think in every society, the studies show that when you empower women, when they're educated, when they have access to microcredit loans, when they're able to start their own businesses, when they're able to exert themselves to reach their self-actualization, that the society improves, the family improves, the society improves, and you're doing that work.
Yes, exactly. And what we know by heart, and also because we have different studies and we do research, is that unless we achieve gender equality, so gender equality is a precondition to achieve sustainable development goals, to achieve peace, to achieve prosperity. Without gender equality, it will be half of the humanity, little bit like second citizens, right? This is on the one hand. On the other hand, it is proven that countries with highest levels or rates of equality are more resilient, sustained better the gains of development. So when times of crisis, economic crisis come, shocks, they can react faster, they can sustain better all the what we call human development assets.
Yeah, exactly. It certainly is.
So
very
it's so
true.
fundamental.
It certainly is.
It's so fundamental.
It certainly is. Now, often on this program, we talk about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 logical, practical, measurable goals to eliminate poverty, to reduce hunger to zero, to combat climate change, preserve the oceans, develop partnerships. And of course, number 5 deals with promoting gender equality and gender equity. And I'm sure that's one of your main areas of focus. You focus on that probably exclusively to a large degree, I guess. Well, maybe not exclusively. You bring in other things like poverty and hunger and what have you. But how important is that as it factors into your planning process and into your programs?
So it's so fundamental. SDG 5, it's about women's leadership, women in leadership positions. It's about eradicating violence against women. It's about access to reproductive health. And for us, for UNDP in particular, we address, for instance, SDG 5, SDG 16. We work a lot also on peace, on strengthening institutions and peace. But I would say out of in SDG 5, if there are, I don't know how many targets, but we cover not all, but almost all. We work, our 4 priority areas on gender equality is women's access to decision-making positions. It means parliaments, but also in judiciary. We wanted to see women judges. We wanted to see women in private sectors, CEOs. We work on participation.
That is so important. I don't want to interrupt
so
you.
fundamental,
I don't want to move to number 2 before we do number 1. That is so important to have women involved in the parliaments, in decision-making positions, in government, in heading up their own businesses and that type of thing. So you have hands-on programs in these various communities around the world to do that.
Yes, definitely. We have programs helping women to access to financial services. We have programs investing in women's entrepreneurship capacities. We have programs, I think we will talk later, like the UNDP Gender Equality Seal certification, working with companies to ensure that women have equal payment, but women have access to higher positions, equally than men. So we cover this kind of what we call economic empowerment of women. But we also work with the governments in advising them on their own policies. We do not implement ourselves. What we do is support the governments for them to implement and through policies and through programs. That's very important to clarify, Bill. That's very important.
It certainly is. There's a misconception, especially in the United States and maybe in other areas of the world, that the UN is a one world government that comes in and tells you what to do, which is not true at all. In fact, like you say, you work with governments, you make suggestions to them, and if they need assistance, technical assistance, you're there to help, be it your agency or the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization or whatever it might be. They're there to provide assistance. But I'm glad you segued into the Gender Equality Certification Program. Rather than pick it up in 10 minutes, let's go into it now.
Let's go now. It's one of my passions.
That's right. There you go.
So this initiative started in Latin America. They are very pioneers, my colleagues in Latin America. They started supporting governments for them to create their own certification for the private sector, to ensure that in companies they have a set of standards, gender equality standards, to definitely improve work environment. And the standards are, for instance, to ensure you do not have pay gap, you have protocols to address sexual harassment, to ensure that you have, for instance, promotion of women equally than men, that you have training. No, there is a set of standards that have been tested through 10 years of work, and it started in Latin America, and now we expanded to Africa, Asia Pacific. We have certified, not us, the governments, 650 companies and impacted in 1.5 million of workers. So it is proven that when you have better work environment, more diverse, more equal, there are some positive effects, like your workers are more engaged. They come to the company happier and with more. We still cannot prove fully the link to productivity, but definitely the benefits are, gender equality generates a lot of benefits. So now we are expanding to public institutions, to ministries. It's really a very successful program.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like it is. It sounds very necessary too.
Definitely.
Kudos. Very good job. It's good to have that. It's very important to focus on women and the positive role they make. Do you find that the reception is getting better? You've said this program started, I think, 10 years ago, I believe. Do you find that more and more businesses, governments are becoming more interested in it?
Absolutely. What I find is that the private sector is becoming a stronger actor when we talk about development of countries. They are engaging with sustainable development goals more and more. And governments understand that the private sector has a lot to say and to contribute to build societies, more peaceful and equal societies. So the demand is increasing. The demand is really increasing. We can see that.
When you have a successful product, they want it and they're going to ask for it, and that spells success for everybody, and everybody should be involved in it.
And the factor of success, one, in my view, is that when we talk about the standards, you talk about things very concrete that everybody can understand. It's not about, concepts that are very far from people. It's something that business can understand, this language of standards.
That's right. It's not a bunch of nebulous terms.
Exactly.
You're absolutely right. Mm-hmm. Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guests. We'd invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you're involved with a PBS or a community access television station, or perhaps an educational institution that has an intra-campus television hookup, or you just have a computer, you have a website, you like our shows, you would like to share them, please feel free to do so. Global Connections Television is provided at no cost as a public service to help us better understand international issues and how they impact our lives. Today we're taking a look at what can be done to help empower women and to promote gender equality. My guest is an expert in this area. Raquel Lagunas is the Interim Director of the Gender Team for the United Nations Development Program, UNDP. Raquel, we're talking about, we got through number 1 and we got into the certification program. You said there were 4 functional areas. What's number 2?
Of
your focus, your main focuses.
Of UNDP.
Of your gender team.
The gender team.
Right,
okay, well, the gender team works on capacity building inside the house. We wanted to do our homework. We work on knowledge production. We produce knowledge research to guide the work of our organization.
What exactly is that, knowledge research? Is
knowledge
this
research.
Scientific studies or?
Yes, studies. Imagine on gender equality and climate change. The impact of natural disasters in women, or the differentiated impact in women and men. We produce this kind of research to help our programs to build the evidences, right? To do the things right. So we also work. We are in charge of the following. Let's call the accountability of what we do. We monitor, and we report to our executive board. That's a very important function for transparency, for every citizens to be aware of what we do and show this information with clarity and prove that we do what we commit to do. This is other function that we have, and I think I'm covering almost all. We have also programs that try to showcase how to do things in the field. We have what we call global programs, and regional programs. So we have these 3 levels of work: global, regional, and country offices. Yeah, that's the summary.
You've alluded to a few of the challenges, but what do you see now as the major problems or challenges or barriers to women? I mean, there's so many out there. we can spend the next 2 hours.
I don't know which one
do we start
choose.
on. But what do you find violence against women? The fact that there are double standards for women in a large number of countries, probably every country to some degree, maybe just not a
Not
lot.
one single country achieved gender equality.
Exactly,
that's
right.
A fact.
Not one. That's very true.
Yeah, that's a fact.
Yeah, but what do you see as your top 3, disadvantages to women? Let's put it like that.
Well, I think you were mentioning one that is one of the most worrisome and dramatic, and is a real violation of women's rights, and is violence against women, right? Sexual violence, including sexual, physical, economic violence. That's 1 out of 3 women have experienced some kind of violence in their lives. So for me that's one of the top challenge. The second one, and I will not say in this order, but equally dramatic or challenging, is when we talk about unpaid care work, what we call the double burden of women, and the lack of distribution of these functions. When I talk about unpaid care work, I talk about household work, or to take care of the kids, or of the old people, or elderly. So the fact that women take 3 or 4 more burden on their shoulders stops them from access to learning, training, better jobs. There is like a cascade of limitation in access to opportunities, and this is one of the most resistant centers to change, or the most resistant barrier to change. So it's like if you see a balance, this is like the production world and the reproduction world, and definitely there is a big disbalance there.
When you were talking about that, it brought to mind some statistics I used to use years ago, and I don't know if they're still accurate now, or I'll ask you, maybe you can tell me. But years ago, there were statistics put out by UN agencies, maybe UNDP, that said that like 1 out of, mostly in economically developing countries, there are barriers in developed countries too, I'm not saying they're not, but in economically developing countries, like 1 out of every 3 households was headed by a woman. Women did 70% of the work in the society. I think dropped to 65% recently. I think I saw that. Women earned 1/10 of what men earned, and they own 1/100th of the property that men own. Have those figures changed? Are they getting better, or getting worse, or where are we?
Let me share with you that what we launched yesterday, that is publication on gender norms as drivers of change.
Yes. Right.
Is showing that, and also our Human Development Report 2019 is showing that we have great progress in what we call basic needs, education, access to education. We have parity, right? Primary and middle school. On health, we made great progress in reducing maternal mortality, even though still we have numbers that we are not happy, right? But in the other areas that are what we call hard power, economic power, political power, the statistics are maybe not exactly what you said, but very, very close. So the progress is slower and not at the speed that the basic needs track is going. So you have, for instance, this is very, in a nutshell, women and men, we vote at the equal rate, more or less, half-half. But we only have 10 women heads of governments. So you have here some kind of challenge. And this is what we are saying, positions that are linked to higher status or greatest responsibilities, including earning, and income, and are the challenging ones right now. And what we found out is norms, beliefs, behaviors, bias are what is sustaining, are the pillars, so the most difficult aspect to tackle, and are the ones that are really stopping, slowing down the progress.
When you mentioned that study, that literally is hot off the press. It just came out yesterday.
It's very fresh from the
still
oven.
Burning.
It's burning.
Still burning.
It's still burning, yes.
That is, I remember seeing just a lead, I haven't read it, obviously, but I remember seeing the lead title, and it says something like, and this was done in economically developed and developing countries, like 90% of the men and women interviewed had biases against women improving their status.
That's very
or what women could do. I won't just say improving their status, but they felt that a man would be better as prime minister or president or whatever. A woman would be better as a housekeeper, that type of thing. That was extremely high. 90%, I thought, anyway. Did that strike you as high?
It's very shocking. We now have this data, and it's 90% of men and 87% of women have at least one gender bias, or bias against women, against gender equality. So it's very high.
And we're talking about women in key policy-making positions, like being a member of a parliament or the United States Congress or something like that. There are some countries, as I recall, I think I may be wrong on this, Rwanda and maybe Liberia, that have high numbers of females in those positions. And I think Rwanda even has a law that a certain number has to be of females. I mean, that may be incorrect.
No, you are correct.
Do you see more of that developing in countries? A few Latin American countries maybe have it, but do you see that that's actually coming to the front?
So what we see is that in countries where they have quota laws, that's where you see the greatest progress. And Rwanda is one of these countries, a successful country, that when they signed the peace agreements, the decision of building the institutions and building the country was very much with the clarity of peace is an opportunity to accelerate gender equality. So Rwanda is a very good case, but it's not by chance that in every country where you see approaching parity or even reaching parity, achieving parity, is because they have affirmative actions. They have quota laws. That's a lesson learned.
There we go. And every country could adopt that.
That's why UNDP promote very proactively quota laws when we work on electoral processes and supporting parliaments. And
a very good idea. Well, in the last 30 seconds we have, the hardest question, what do you see as the biggest challenge as you move forward to promote gender equality?
Well,
it's the hardest.
It's difficult to give just one challenge because because of the complexity of the challenges. So I think that what we learned with this report that we launched is that the next generation of challenges are about these non-tangible and difficult to measure things like bias that are really regulating our relationships, how do we together make decisions on the kind of society that we want. So the next generation of public policies, interventions and discussion about how to accelerate to achieve gender equality is going to be this kind of complex conversation that is about very deep roots of what we think about ourselves. What do you think about women? What do you think about men? And many other aspects of what we call gender the gender cosmos or gender constellation.
Exactly, and the important thing is that we recognize this bias and we realize it's inculcated into our mores, folkways, into our cultures and our subcultures. We be aware of that and we make sure that we don't allow it to derail or to undermine other people in the society. But Raquel Lagunas, I want to thank you so very much
Thank
for
you to
a
you.
very interesting and a very informative program. Thank you.
Thank you. So can I add one thing?
10 seconds.
In 10 seconds, to add to the discussion on norms and social values, we will need really to pay attention to the impact of digitalization in society and in women and men, and climate change.
Perfect way to close it. Thank you so very much. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections program.